Special good morning and welcome to you, Mr. Griffith, and welcome.
Good morning, Tobago. Fine, thank you. My pleasure.
Great to have you. All right, so now we're talking a bit about the Commissioner of Police and the tenure review. Start us off.
Okay, tenure review, Gary Griffith. And I took over. There was 14% public trust and confidence in the police service. When I left, it was 59%. A year after I left, it was 8%. Tenure Gary Griffith, it was the highest reduction in violent crime in 17 years. It was my last full year with 342 murders in comparison to over 600 a year after I left. 89% of the population were very comfortable with me as commissioner, had no concern and wanted me to remain. 89%, which was the highest poll ever taken by anyone in public trust and belief in the individual. I got 72 out of 75 of the assessments done annually by the Police Service Commission being good and very good and excellent. Yet a Minister of National Security saw that as a failure. That sums up the tenure review.
Well, I mean, you've been attracted quite a lot of attention from the government, and to the point where we're seeing press conferences dedicated solely to you and just to commenting on certain things, and specifically, some things that happened under your tenure. And I mean, of course, the circumstances that led to the closure of SAUTT or the end of SAUTT and so on. What can you tell us about that? Because, it has attracted quite a lot of a conversation in the last few days.
You think? Well, yes, definitely. That press conference was done because a prime minister who was in Ireland on vacation discovered that Gary Griffith is going up as the candidate for St. Joseph, and polls being conducted shows that PNM is going to be annihilated in St. Joseph because of me actually becoming the candidate there in St. Joseph. So that was the panic button. Remember, PNM has 22 seats. So now with 22, they've now lost one. So that's 22 down to 21. So that's one down, one more to go. So they're seeing themselves, this has been 50% of the avenue towards them getting thrown out of government. So the panic button was pressed, and that's what this was all about. Because remember, this is something that took place 3 years ago. Amy Brown had this so-called letter from the US 3 years ago. Why bring it up now? This is a totally politically manufactured, desperate attempt to see if we could try to throw mud on Gary Griffith. And if you look at today's, I think it's the Express editorial, it slammed the whole country is seen it for what it is. It was totally politically manufactured. It was littered with lies, misleading information, and we could run through the whole thing. When Amy Brown stated that the US decided to shut down SAUTT because of the death of 2 persons, up to now, not one police officer has been arrested. So you have not arrested a police officer based on something, but the US decided to shut it down because of that. And if that is the case, there have been over 100 police killings since I left. You would have seen the MOFA shootings and so forth. And this is not to state that all of these different units, the GB, the IATF, the MOPS, the Northern Division, should be shut down, but there must be investigations, and if police are culpable, they will be removed. But they don't shut down a whole unit because of one isolated incident. And likewise, Coast Guard, there was the incident with Coast Guard with persons being killed whilst in the control of Coast Guard. You want to shut down the Coast Guard? Let's look at the front page of today's Guardian. The front page of today's Guardian, a prisoner was killed. Whilst being, is it they going to blame the prison commissioner? Is it the US shut down and demand that they shut down the prison service? So it shows the stupid of Amy Brown. And the media doesn't ask these questions. They say, well, if it is that the US shut down SAUTT because of an incident involving 2 persons, up to now, not one person has been arrested after 3 years. Why is the US going to have no concern about the front page of today's Guardian with the prisoner or the Coast Guard officers with the persons that died under their watch, or the 100+ murders that took place in the police killings after? So it showed that they tried something and it failed. What I can tell you is the same US government, to me, when they met with me, they voiced their utmost concern and disgust by this government as it pertains to their close affiliation with certain countries who can be deemed communist countries. So if everyone wants to speak about meetings, I will start speaking about meetings. The US government wants them out. You'd have seen an actual video that was done with the last US ambassador where he stated that Trinidad and Tobago is blessed to have someone as me as a commissioner of police. No US official ever gave such commendation to anyone in Trinidad and Tobago like that. So for Amy Brown to try to pretend that I affected US relations, I think I have cemented U.S. relations more than anything else. And as it pertains to the SSA, Fitzgerald Hines and Keith Rowley continues to show their ignorance in understanding national security. To say that cabinet gave approval for SSA persons to have firearms, that is a lie. Politicians can't give approval for persons to get firearms. That only comes from the Constitution, it only comes from the law, it only comes from the authorization of the Commissioner of Police. Persons in the SSA for years gone by, over a decade plus, acquired firearms and had firearms before this cabinet gave approval. Cabinet can't give approval. And because there will be persons in the SSA who will be present police officers, members of the Defense Force, or they may have a FUEC, a Firearm Users Employee Certificate, that gives them the authorization to carry a firearm. The audacity of this incompetent government, who are clueless on national security, to believe that SSA should not carry firearms. The SSA is equivalent to the CIA. Could anyone think that the CIA will not carry firearms? The SSA is supposed to guard their installations. The SSA has to be going in volatile areas, 2 o'clock in the morning, sitting on in a vehicle, trying to pinpoint and get photographs to get information of criminal elements. And they're not supposed to carry firearms. It shows the stupidity of these persons who call themselves politicians in this PNM government.
Now, Mr. Griffith, now before I want to talk a little bit more about that whole SSA situation, I want to sort of deal with this whole issue of the SAUTT. And, you know, it's sort of when Minister Hines brought up the issues, you know, he brought up a situation that has been quite traumatic for the country because it was attached to the murder of Andrea Barrett. And, you know, that was something that touched everybody in the country. And, you know, I know a lot of people are not too sure how they feel now about all of that coming back up. But can you tell me a little bit about what really happened? Was the information given by the minister the truth, or if it was not, you know, what's your version of it?
Well, my version of it is that the minister and this PNM government continues to look after and put focus on the rights of criminal elements over that of law-abiding citizens. I'm not saying that criminal elements should not have rights, but let's look at it. When I spoke, firstly, when I continued to fight to give law-abiding citizens firearms, they were upset about it, and they decided instead to stop law-abiding citizens from getting firearms. 2, I was putting emphasis to try to get a border protection unit to get mobile scanners for us to deal with illegal firearms. As soon as I left, they ignored that border protection unit and they shut down the mobile scanners, allowing more illegal firearms to come into the country to kill innocent people. 3, when I mentioned the fact that we should have a law amended that if anyone has an assault weapon that is illegal, they should be charged and be deemed a terrorist so that they will have 25 years in prison immediately. Have it as a capital offense. Make sure that persons who brought in that weapon, persons who protected these individuals would all be deemed terrorists, and that will start cleaning out these individuals who have the type of weapons that can kill 35 persons in 3 seconds. Keith Rowley automatically shut it down by stating Gary Griffith is trying to allude that everybody must be a terrorist, which was a lie. He continues to lie. So they had a problem with me with trying to find a way for criminal elements with automatic weapons to get to be deemed terrorists so that they will not get bail easily as they do now. And then 4, let's look at this same situation here with Andrea Barrett, and you continue to fight and be concerned about these 2 individuals who had over 68 charges for all type of sexual misconduct, rape, sexual actions, grievous bodily harm on females. 60. And you never once bothered about the concern of Andrea Barrett, her family, the 60 women who kept walking the streets, being traumatized, wondering if these 2 men who were charged for rape and were given bail within 24 hours could come back out onto the streets to finish them off. So where's the concern about the law-abiding citizens? But you do a press conference about these 2 individuals who had 60 different charges for raping women and getting bail the very next day. And you're very concerned about how that they died, and you have a right to, but we'll never have any concern about the 60 women who have suffered, the concern about the thousands of people who have been killed and how their families have felt. You're always concerned about the criminal elements and their rights. And that says a lot about this government. As I continue to say, the scales of justice, my intention of getting back into government and into politics is to make sure that the scales of justice can be tilted towards the benefit of the law-abiding citizens than the criminal elements. And again, going back to the SSA, to the situation, as I said, with SAUTT, in this situation, not one person has been charged, not one person has been arrested. So on what grounds is Fitzgerald Hines trying to accuse and label SAUTT And SAUTT was the front line. That is number 5, by the way. SAUTT was the main avenue that was pegging back criminals, arresting major criminal elements, put an end to kidnapping. SAUTT ended kidnapping by arresting kidnappers whilst they still had victims. That was never done before. They were the front line in stopping human trafficking, child prostitution. You shut that down. You have to be evil, actually evil, to have a unit like that was so instrumental to peg back criminals, and your first thing you wanted to do was to shut it down. And it's because certain individuals in government misled the US and gave the US false information about SAUTT. Because as I said, the US would not shut down SAUTT just because of one incident that took place. Because if that is the case, as I said, there have been over 100 police killings. Think about it. Why didn't shut down the IATF, the GB, the MOPS, the Northern Division? Why didn't shut down the Coast Guard? Why don't shut down the prison service? Because of the exact thing that took place that's on the front page of today's Guardian. So it shows the lies, the deceit, and the double standard of this government.
Was there that meeting? Were you aware of that meeting that Minister Brown talked about on Tuesday regarding a delegation from the U.S. Embassy and his office about that whole situation?
Well, and that's the interesting point. If there was such a meeting, it wouldn't have taken place yesterday or last week. This would have been 3 years ago. Why are you bringing up the meeting now? You know why? Gary Griffith announced that he was going up for St. Joseph. That is what pressed the panic button on them. As soon as Gary said he's going up for St. Joseph, they started panicking. Because if you're aware of this meeting, why didn't bring this up 3 years ago? Because I would have brought to the attention of the country that the PNM government they are manipulating, they are lying to the US government. They were giving information to the US government that caused the US government to write that. The US government will not shut down and say that they are not supporting a unit because of one incident. Because if that is the case, as I said, I would have then said, why didn't shut down? You remember the Mova shootings where 3 persons were killed at the hands of the police. That was they had ITF, they had GB, they had MOPS, they had the Northern Division. We've had dozens and dozens of police killings. Why the US didn't shut down all of those units? Because the PNM government continued to mislead the US government and pump lies and misinformation. Look at it, the front page of today's papers. So that is why Emery Brown kept it. He knew he couldn't have said it, but he got a call from Ireland Prime Minister saying, look, Gary going up for St. Joseph. Fitzy, Emery, go on, do a press conference and just attack Gary. And if you look at today's Express editorial, it has exposed them. It has backfired miserably. This has been seen as nothing more than a political manufactured witch hunt with absolutely no evidence, no documents, nothing whatsoever. Even going with the SSA lies, trying to say that I gave authorization for people in SSA to carry firearms. That is a lie. Why would I, as a commissioner of police, I have nothing better to do than to give an approval for SRP in SSA to get firearms? The SSA has their own armory, and that armory was given to the SSA, guess by who? The PNM government. The PNM government gave SSA the authority to have all of these weapons that they claim that was being used by this pastor. So what the PNM have done, the one thing they're good at is to say the same lie over and over and hope that persons will believe it. They have not.
So, Mr. Griffith, just we gotta go for a break in a second, but if I understand you clearly, is that you were not aware of that meeting that happened 3 years ago?
No, and that says a lot. So if it is that I was commissioner of police, you will think that I would be part of that meeting. Now, if it is I was no longer commissioner of police, the meeting could take place. But as I said, the US would not call a meeting to shut down a unit because, say that they're not supporting a unit because of an incident that took place where the matter was still being investigated. Because if they do that, why they didn't meet with Emery Brown to shut down all of the several other police units that have been involved in police killings? The only reason that meeting took place is because the PNM government pumped false information to the US, and the US unfortunately had to work with the lies because the PNM government wanted SAUTT shut down because obviously SAUTT was affecting big criminal enterprise, and there are persons in the government that benefit from big criminal enterprise.
So, Mr. Griffith, I don't know if you have any insight as to why is the conversation so focused on people's legal acquisition of firearms as opposed to stopping the illegal gun trade?
The reason being, as I mentioned, this government is inclined towards assisting and looking after the rights of criminals rather than law-abiding citizens. As I mentioned, Look at what happened with the Andrea Barrett situation. Press conference over the concern, and is there right? Over 2 persons who were charged with over 60 different matters for sexual criminal acts on women. No press conference about Andrea Barrett and the other people who have suffered. You want to shut down SAUTT. You mislead the US and lie to them to shut down SAUTT because it was instrumental in stopping kidnapping, stopping home invasions, arresting criminal elements, and you wanted the US to shut that, get an excuse to justify shutting it down. And it's the same thing with firearms. They have gone out. They have done nothing to deal with putting an end to illegal firearms. They have made no statement as to what they intend to do. No plans, no policies, no unit, no technology. I drafted a proper system for a border protection unit 4 years ago. Keith Rowley ignored it. It seems that this government was concerned that we can put an end to illegal weapons entering the country. The US told us that over 95% of illegal weapons enter through illegitimate ports of entry. I acquired mobile scanners to be able to assist. They shut it down after I left. So it seems that this government is either aiding and abetting, sympathetic, or involved heavily in the criminal underworld. And that could only be, it can't be incompetence. Because when you look at the other side of the coin, with legal firearms, which is there to protect, that is all they speak about. So they have no interest about stopping illegal firearms, and all they speak about is stopping law-abiding citizens from getting legal firearms. You either have to be a criminal or incompetent as a politician to operate in that manner. And going back now to the legal firearms, Keith Rowley again showed his misleading the country by stating there's a government policy pertaining to firearms. And you don't say, but he's a liar. That is a lie. There's no such thing as government policy. There's a law, and you adhere to the law. What happened is commissioners before me were too lazy to do their job, which is what caused the backlog of 25,000 applications. 25,000. And then after me, now commissioners are being sued because they're too lazy to even sign their name, and then telling the judge, well, I'm busy, I have lots of things to do, and the judge had to put her in her place. So out of 25,000, I was able to, out of 3 years, approve 6,000 out of 25,000. Many I did because we went through a stringent process. Out of that 6,000, 3,000 odd were for law enforcement officials, past and present, soldiers, sailors, customs, immigration, fire, prisons, police officers, to protect them and their family when they get home. That is a problem. The other 3,000 were to civilians who needed it, who acquired it based on a stringent process, background check, their spouse approving it, making sure that they can secure it properly. And that's for the small businessman, the farmer, the hunter, the sports person. You have a problem with that? And out of that 6,000, during my 3-year period, not one was lost, not one was stolen, not one was used for a crime. So it showed that we had a proper system. So increasing the numbers doesn't mean that it's going to make it a greater likelihood that it can affect. And not one of these things, as I said, was used to commit a crime. The lies by the government in stating, well, all these persons being killed, it could be by legal firearms. Legal firearms. That is a lie, because ballistic testing is done on everybody when there's a shooting, and the ballistic testing can pinpoint if that came from a legal firearm. So those were all lies. In fact, dozens upon dozens of lives were saved by me issuing these legal firearms. And then they lied again by stating that we were giving it out to everyone. That is a lie. If I give out 3,000 civilians firearms out of 1.4 million, I think that's 0.3% of the population, 0.3%. And you have a problem with that? But between yourself and your minister and an acting commissioner, they asked me for over 60 firearms for their and their friends in high places. So it's okay for the rich and famous to get firearms, but when I was giving it to the small man, you had a problem with it. And then what made it worse is you as a prime minister harassed me to get a firearm dealership for somebody in Tobago so that hundreds of more firearms can be sold. So it showed the hypocrisy. How can anybody want to support a political party and a prime minister like that? How?
And then how does this whole situation now, this lawsuit and all these things that are coming out with Mr. Brand Thomas, how does this tie into this the issue of firearms here and the way we deal with it in Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, again, the Brent Thomas matter was desperation. And I tell you, as the first day I get in the government, I'm going to make sure that there's an inquiry and somebody is going to make a jail. Because no police officer has the authority to leave the jurisdictional waters, the territorial waters of Trinidad and Tobago without the approval of the Minister of National Security or a senior government official in the National Security Council. And the reason I can say that is I'm the only person who was a security minister and a commissioner of police in this country. So I know the role and function of both. So the 3 police officers who went to abduct Brent Thomas could not have left Trinidad and Tobago unless a politician gave approval, which means that that politician could very well be charged for aiding and abetting in an abduction. And that is where there's a massive cover-up. Thankfully, by Brent Thomas now making this to Barbados and suing Barbados, Barbados will now bring out the information to state that Minister so-and-so gave the information and the approval for these police officers to leave Trinidad and Tobago. And then if it is that this goes down as an abduction, it means the police officers hopefully I will put plea bargaining, find out who is the minister who gave them that authorization, and that person should be charged for aiding and abetting in kidnapping. But that was the desperation that took place by the PNM. They could not find anyone. So you had 25,000 applicants for firearms. You had 6,000 that received. You had 7,000 police officers. You had over 20 firearm dealers, and not one was arrested for anything. Yet they continue to lie to speak about a massive, well-oiled criminal industry. But after 4 years, not one person has been charged, not one person has been arrested, not one person has been held, except Brent Thomas. And the reason they did that was because of desperation. They needed to hold somebody. And the judge then said, they cannot believe that something like this would have taken place, and that the officers who did this are still on active duty.
Well, unfortunately, we're out of time this morning, so we're going to have to leave the conversation right there. But I want to thank you so much, Mr. Griffith, for being on with us and to clearing up some of the air on some of the things that are floating around in the space.
My pleasure. Take care.